r/AskReddit by Redmond Dts. Hikers of Reddit, what has been the most fucked up thing you've seen? This was 2 decades ago. They used to do donkey tours in the Grand Canyon. You ride the donkey and then hike. You can camp, but we did the day tour. A woman that was probably in her late 60s or early 70s was in front of me and on an incline started to act strange. She was swaying left and right as on a steep cliff, which was very safe and wide. It swayed back and forth for maybe a minute and she was slumped over and then boom, it looked like she passed out and pulled the donkey to the left and fell over the cliff. I saw her tumble over and then they were just gone. I can't remember how far down the fall was, but it had to be over 100 feet. Immediately the guide jumped off at the front, ran over and let out an audible scream before stopping after realizing she had a tour with her. A few people got off their donkey and she stopped them from peering over. A few of the other guides looked over and they made some radio calls and then we proceeded. It was very obvious that something really serious had happened, but we never found out. I'm pretty sure I watched a woman and a donkey fall to their death in the Grand Canyon. A seagull having sex with a dead seagull. It looked at me like I was in the wrong. Didn't appreciate that judgy little glance at all. I had hiked in 15 miles to an alpine wilderness and just laid down for the night when a youngish guy in shorts and no back pops out and asks me if I have water. I of course shared my water. He immediately said he had been hiking since yesterday. Apparently him and his friend went way back and off trail, skirting some cliffs along the way. Then he just says half jokingly, yeah, his brains are everywhere. I laughed half acidly, but he was sending off a really deadly vibe, not dangerous. Just stone cold shock. I asked him to clarify that last part, and offered him food and a cigarette. I also ordered him to sit down. He didn't want to because he would lose his legs if he sat now, but I explained he needed to sit a while. Long story short, his friend slipped and fell and when he hit, his head popped and then his body got wedged in a crevasse. The guy I was talking to had spent all the previous day hiking around the cliff to find his friend. Then had to hike out of the valley up the ridge and down again, all on a slope off trail. He was absolutely shredded, skinned, tore up. He was begging me to come with him and help me get his friend out of the hills. That's the part that really stuck with me. He got up and was about 3 feet into the bush when I grabbed him gently and said, "Hey, I got a phone, we'll see if emergency service works." Somehow it did, and I have zero idea how, technically or otherwise. We were standing in a glacial cratered alpine lake, 15 miles from the trailhead. I got rescue up there, and man, I was super impressed with their response. Within a few hours the first group of volunteers were passing my camp. These guys all looked like supermen, and they were. All night afterwards a constant stream of rescue volunteers. I stayed camp and made a comfy spot for them to rest on the way down. They had to wait up there in whiteout conditions for 6 nights. But rather than leave they kept a constant vigil over the hiker's dead body. When the weather broke, a chopper flew in and took them all out. I've never been so deeply moved and impressed with that kind of selflessness in something we regard as a hobby, a sport. Words that take away the very dangerous nature of it. Read all these stories and it seems most are deaths by slip and fall. Happens too easy, don't take the chance with your life. Been hiking for 11 years and haven't seen anything too crazy, but a couple concerning things have happened. I was hiking a trail that had recently been destroyed by a storm, and it was pretty easy to get lost. Eventually made it to the summit of the mountain, where we would camp for the night. It's about 6 p.m. and we set up our tent site, and this guy coming from a separate trail passes us. He said he was day hiking, but the nearest hut or road was 16 miles away, and it was 6 p.m. He had no flashlight either. We advised that he turned around, as the trail would be nearly impossible at night, but he insisted that he would finish the hike. He didn't even have a flashlight, so we gave him one of our headlamps. The morning came, and you could see his footprints lead to the destroyed trail, so I guess we didn't change his mind. We went back the way we came, and eventually passed the nearest hut, can't miss it. The trail only led to that hut, and asked the workers if they had seen the guy, to which they responded no. No news ever came up of someone dying or going missing that week, so I presume he's fine, but scary situation nonetheless. few years ago my wife and her friends were out east of Portland, Oregon on a really hot weekend and, on their way to Hood River, decided to stop at a place called Punch Bowl to cool off. They were going to be fast, so they just brought bathing suits and flip-flops and were just going to run up the mile or so trail to jump in, jump out, and keep driving. They had just arrived at Punch Bowl and were greeted by a fairly sizable crowd, maybe 75-100 people total spread out. They had just gotten out from swimming, then they see a little trail of smoke. Within minutes the small trail of smoke is huge and noticeable smell is growing. A few folks get spooked and go to leave to the parking lot only to return panicked shortly after, saying a firewall had blocked the trail. They immediately call 911. Within a few minutes a helicopter's over them and begins dropping notes on caution tape down to the group saying, "Run. Large fire spreading fast, head down." Followed very quickly after with trail consumed, stay put. The fire is visible now and rapidly growing. A volunteer somehow got herself back there with a map and GPS and mapped out a possible route to escape as long as winds sustained their current models. Ultimately, through 36 hours of terror, they hiked 15 miles plus on rugged terrain out barefoot in bathing suits in the middle of what later came known to be the Eagle Creek fire that almost torched the whole one side of the Columbia River Valley, escaping with their lives. But my wife still suffers some PTSD when she smells campfires. She said that for essentially 12-14 hours total of it they had zero idea of where they were going, if there was any remote chance of getting out, or even if they were going the right way following this group. All 75 plus people made it out okay. Pretty incredible teamwork. Edit. Reason for fire was some little teenager shot a bottle rocket down off a cliff into the worst possible area to shoot one. Classic idiot kid. Was caught. Tough situation for all involved. I was in the Grand Canyon in 2008 during a huge flash flood that ran through there at the time. We were camping down in the bottom after a couple big days of backpacking around, and in the middle of the night it tore through. The waters went up 60 or 70 feet and everyone was fleeing up the cliff walls for their lives. A couple people were swept over the large falls. We saw bears running down and scrambling up trees before they fell over. But the craziest thing I saw was a woman with a baby strapped to her back climbing across one of those river jumping ropes to get to a boulder on the other side before they got swept away. She was 2 or 3 feet over the water shooting down there at crazy speeds, carrying massive trees crashing down along the way. We were terrified for them. Someone casually lobbing grapefruit-sized rocks downhill, directly where we'd been a few cutbacks prior. Didn't even think he might kill someone. This was Wisdom Tree in Los Angeles, so imagine a very steep traverse. In 2020 or 2021, some teens threw a log down a hill at a state park. They, accidentally, killed a photographer who was shooting either senior photos for high school or graduation photos. This was in Ohio. Edited to add it was in 2019. The kids were like 15 or 16 at the time. They are currently halfway through 3-year juvie sentences. Honestly hope this has shaken them and truly made them want to grow so they can be better people when they leave jail. Going from high school to jail to adulthood is an unfortunate experience that many times just shuts off any possibility of a happy, normal future for the young person. Hiking a trail in Sedona alone, I heard a strange sound like thunder clapping. I stopped hiking, then a boulder the size of 3 basketballs comes bouncing down the mountain about 15 feet in front of me. Freaking yikes. Someone's backpack, jacket, and wallet left on the edge of a 2000 cliff in a popular national park. Rangers found the body at the bottom the following day. I was on the Matanuska Glacier ice climbing, and before we started scaling the wall a tour guide walked up with a group he was showing around. There was a small waterfall, and he filled up his water bottle, explaining how this is the best water in the world, the most pure and blah blah blah. Anyways, we climb up like 20 feet, and there in the stream just above the waterfall is a dead and rotting carcass of some kind of bird or mammal, completely grey and directly feeding the waterfall he just filled up his bottle with. Yes, any stream can be infected. Better is water which bubbles out of the earth. I was on a mountain rescue team for several years. Saw a lot of stuff, but one that stands out is a guy who fell over 2,000 feet off a cliff and onto rocks. Not pretty. I stumbled upon a meeting of Basque TA separatists, terrorists, near San Sebastian, Spain. Guards, guard dogs, the whole bit. It was a fairly terrifying 10 minutes as we played the role of dumb, lost tourists and they figured out what to do with us. Fortunately they escorted us away instead of throwing us off the cliffs into the ocean. I was in the Frank Church Wilderness in Idaho doing some biological survey work. We were 30 miles from the nearest trailhead and got an early start to avoid the heat. About a mile into our hike, we hear the bushes stir near the trail. Up pops a man wearing nothing but a loincloth and Nikes carrying a very small bag and a hunting rifle. He says morning and takes off sprinting down the trail. Never did see him again. So many questions. A few years ago a new hiking buddy climbed up a waterfall, slipped on some pine needles on the top and fell 40 feet down onto rock. I was the first person there, blood pouring out of head, broken spine, shine broke through the skin. He bit below his mouth and pretty much had a second mouth. It took an hour or two for medics to get to us and another 2 hours to use ropes to lift him out of the valley to a helicopter. Miraculously, he was out of the hospital after a few months and eventually regained full movement. All medical experts were shocked he made a full recovery. Most traumatic event of my life by far. Me and a friend were hiking in the mountains and heard what sounded like a hose bib running. We were deep in the mountains so there should not be water running. We tracked the sound to a large depression in the side of a hill and looked in and there was a mass of rattlesnakes mating. The mass was huge and there had to be at least 100 of them all intertwined. Apparently that's how they mate. Massive snake orgies. I walked past a campsite with a ton of smashed alcohol bottles and trash. Started feeling uncomfortable and walked faster to where the trail looked over a canyon. Smelled something bad and looked down to see, like 3 feet from me, 2 bloated dead dog heads sticking out from a rolled up tarp. Immediately turned around and booked it to my car. I called the Forest Service to report it. I think some people got drunk and killed the dogs, or maybe it was a dog fighting thing. There may have been more under that tarp, but I was freaked out. I think if it was someone's pets they would have tried to bury them. I worked summers in Yellowstone as a teen. The amount of stupidity was and is astounding. One summer a bison wandered to the boardwalk of Old Faithful and played down. We were directing people to give her room. A woman holding her baby started running towards the big old girl. She wanted a photo of her baby on the animal. Luckily one of the rangers grabbed her and her child. The woman was pissed off and threatened to sue. Lol. My ex and I went for a little evening hike on the trails by our campground and it felt eerie and kept turning around because we felt like we were being followed but never saw anything. When we got back to the trailhead we got chewed out by the park ranger because they had a lot of mountain lion activity and we weren't supposed to be out at dusk. That feeling I hope I never feel again. I got in a scuffle with a pissed off mama bobcat. More like a standoff than a scuffle thankfully. I was screaming at the top of my lungs for it to go away. There was no way but forward and I was late to work. A woman I ran into later thought I was being raped. See, even she was cautious. That was what I was dealing with. My wife and I were hiking on a remote trail. I had to pee, so I stepped behind an evergreen and started to do my business. A about 60-year-old woman came out of nowhere, dropped her pants and peed. Right next to me. As in my junk was about 30 inches from her face. We strangely watched each other pee while chatting about the hike. My wife saw this go down 10 years later and she can't bring it up without giggling. Edit. I don't know if I had picked a great tree or if she just wanted a look at some junk. Either way, total badass. We were about 8-10 miles into the Wind River Range when we decided to camp near a nice lake. We wanted to get off the trail and the lake shore, so we walked up beside the inlet stream. There we found at least 100 piles of human waste plus toilet paper, not buried, and right next to a pretty stream. Disgusting. Me and my friend had just set up camp and chilled for a little bit not far from an pretty overgrown trail that seemed almost abandoned and forgotten. We were spooked by a noise and it was a mountain biker coming down that steep and bad trail rather reckless. He then stopped, hastily pulled his shorts down and squatted down to spray diarrhea like crazy before he kept going. We were pretty camouflaged so he never noticed us watching. Edit. Never expected a comment literally about poop to blow up. You made my day reading the replies. Lol. I was on a trail in Shenandoah and came across this couple just banging away outside their tent. It was like they wanted us to see them. I'm a hiker, not my story. I am a mental health professional and have a co-worker who saw someone for a long time that had a lot of fantasies around becoming a serial killer. This person would go into the woods with a hammer and try to psych themselves up to see if they could hit murder any solo hikers. I believe they actually struck people on 2 different occasions but failed. So anyways, happy Sunday. I found a knee in the woods once. My dog ran off the trail, then came back with something in his mouth. As he got closer I saw this hinged thing swinging back and forth as he trotted over to me. Bones and nasty meat and a knee joint. I made him drop it and we kept going. I was really baked and freaked out and wanted to get out of there fast. Cats buried in boxes, chewed dog collars from when people abandoned their pets. That's all folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening. Tell your friends about me.